Right, critique time! So for today, how about a map? And how about the last map of the payload race maps? If you remember, there has been a critique already for Banana Bay, High Tower and Nightfall, which only leaves Pipeline left. So, map. Pipeline. Outside of, I don't know, season events. So, disclaimer as always, this is not gonna be a discussion in depth on game design. We're gonna focus more on the visuals. And this critique is gonna go on through Feldman's method, which is about 4 steps in order. Description, analysis, interpretation, and judgment. On the description, basically, there's gonna be a description of what's on the artwork. On the analysis, there's going to be a discussion on the elements of art. On the interpretation, there will be an interpretation of the creative vision behind the art. And on the judgment step, there will be a judgment call of successful or unsuccessful artwork. Whoops. You know what? Whatever. And based on the principles of art. So without further ado, let us begin. First things first, description. So, let's see, there is like a shutter door here, and there is this room with a bunch of blue in it. There is this blackboard here with a bunch of numbers and things. There's a word map. There is the classic Team Fortress 2 locker with ammunition and medical supplies, an open locker here, a clock, towels, a bench, some air ducts, some papers for you to tell when your shift is over to your boss. What else? Some barrels, a milk can, a pipe. The blocks on the walls seem to be made out of concrete. Windows here. An arrow sign, some shelves with some planks, a wooden crate, some other stuff, a metal plate here. In living there's here this open area. It's nighttime, there's a bunch of buildings around, there's the payload, basically a bomb on rails. And pickups down here. Over there's the control point with the yellow hologram triangle thing. There's this cart rails on the ground. There's this great platform here with the light here, which is creating the hologram. There is a grid here, very close to the control point with something beyond it. There is also crates here. There is a truck here. Cool. Small truck, some tires, more pickups. Behind this fence, a light bulb. There are some like tubes there, things used to construct pipes, stuff like that. What else? More barrels, another metal plate and a wooden platform. There's a specific name for this. Also, if you remember, feel free to say something, write it somewhere here on the stream or on YouTube. Some oxygen cylinders, what's the name of this? Yeah, containers, whatever. More shelves with crate and barrel, staircase here, bunch of details, right? A big A in here, more windows. What else? Ouch. There's an industrial wire coil over here. There's a sink here. Wow. I think it's a good idea to not describe every single thing, especially when it's repeated. So that's why you won't hear every single thing. Avoiding repetitions ought to be a good deal. A door here. What else is there? More windows and pickups. More of the same, right? There is this slight roof here. Entrance. And yeah. Over here there's like the slope and the main pathway of the payloads with this bunch of fluid containers in the middle. And there is like this fence, this sort of gate here part where the rails cross. And on the other side of the map we have basically everything that we have already seen, that was already described. Symmetry. There's a fuse box here, although some details ought to be there, so it doesn't hurt to check out. Creamy's Burgers! Capture point. Is there anything here? Mop and bucket. We could... well... the walls are made out of what? Concrete? The ground is red. Ah, cool. There is a hook here on this part. Although, other than that, it's mostly the same. And yeah. So, windows, light bulbs. Over there, a water tank. Oops. Apparently. Some industrial chimneys back there. Stuff like that. Builders League United B. So yeah, since this is a multi-stage map, it's time to check the other stages. So that was stage 1. Here we have stage 2 with the B point. So but it was looking on stage 1, looking at the red spawn room was missing. So let's go there it's time to go there real quick. Conserve energy. So okay, here the walls are made out of painted white bricks, barrels, and there's basically what we have seen before. Although here instead of a word map, there is some sort of blueprint for something. But yeah, but the rest is mostly the same, right? So okay, so now let's move on to stage 2 of pipeline, blood race pipeline. Just a warning, much like for Nightfall, I think today there's gonna be the 3 stages, and that's gonna matter for the interpretation. And so there's going to be like a description for all 3, then an analysis for all 3, and then the interpretation with all 3 stages considered. So if that's said, where is the looting spawn? It's here. So no clip, 0. Okay, here on stage 2, things are mostly the same. Again, the lockers, the open locker. The locker and the open lockers, the clock, again black bar, although this time I have blueprints on the blue side of the map. A bunch of details and stuff again. There's like this. This is like a belting. We have there's some sort of workstations here, or something with like a bunch of buttons and screens, and like some sort of radar. A clock here. Battlements. If you move on, there are more shelves, and through another shutter door, you exit to this area here. Again, it's nighttime. We're still in this sort of industrial complex thing with the industrial chimneys and the fluid containers. And now I have this like very industrial part of a chimney. So yeah, there's sort of small bridge here. Rails again, and the control point again, although this time there is a blue B in there. Warning, toxic chemicals. Or more of the same, more of the same. This wall, much like the other, is made out of concrete blocks, it seems. There's like a rack here, bunch of wooden boxes. Here inside there is more fluid containers and pipes and barrels. Another shelf. Beacon. An advertisement, I guess. Either I didn't stop to... Yeah, there are others, I just didn't stop to look at them. Industrial, trust the best. Danger, high voltage, keep out. A warning. And in here also there is like this electric devices thing. What's the name of this? If you know, feel free to type it out. Lights. There are more light bulbs, this time on this sort of rope thing. There are more metal plates over there, barrels, planks, wooden planks. Barrels here under this set of stairs. There's a whole bunch of like specific architecture that would demand like proper terminology, so yeah. About that, this ought to just go on with, this critique ought to just go on with simpler terms without getting too technical, honestly. Caution, no trespassing. This is some sort of bunch of indicators and gauges, and looks like they communicate you the pressure of some fluid. Would make sense considering the fluid containers, right? And yeah, a bunch of stuff like that, so controls and indicators there. Another set of air ventilation ducts. Oh, okay. Blue, Builders League United, and the red, Reliable Excavation Demolition, the two logos of the two companies. We have those here, very cool. And also ventilation duct proper here. And if you go down here, restricted area, authorized personnel, there's like this tunnel in here where both payloads cross their paths with this like area here, and then it's the red team side of the map with not that much things different, right? I suppose like the materials is different. On this part it's made out of wood, on the blue team side it's made out of the concrete, as was mentioned before. What else? There's a camera here. Tires. So this part of the rails seems to be closed. Another control point. There is this B, red B here. Also, in case you're wondering and never played a payload race map with multiple stages, if you only play High Tower all your life or something, the deal with going through, once you win on the first stage, on the next one, the winning team's payload starts a bit further ahead, so there's like a slight advantage considering who on the previous round for multi-stages payload races map. So because where is it? Because there is like this white line which indicates where the payload begins, right? And whoever won on the previous round, I would guess would start here or something. At least I tested it for Nightfall, and that's exactly what happens. The winning team gets advantage at the beginning, and why shouldn't it be the case for Pipeline also, you know? In any case, barrels, wooden crates, more of the same, right? Is there anything else here to mention? Okay, so this wall is made out of a bunch of red bricks. On the other side, there. Okay. On the other, oh no, this is stage 3. Whoops. Okay, so okay, this whole part's made out of red bricks, and there is red written in this part. And on the blue side of it, for comparison, this is made out of, I don't know, what's this? Not sure if concrete or bricks also, but not the red ones. Yeah, some I would guess it looks concrete. It looks like concrete, and there is blue written on it. Window, and yeah, and it seems like that's it. Control point, all that stuff. So now it's time to go to the last stage. Payload race pipeline stage 3. So if you stand on the control room, sorry, on the spawn room, more of the same, benches. This time there are like some dumbbells and this scale here. What's the name of this? A clock, open lockers with a bunch of clothes and personal belongings. The locker classic. Hey, there's a water cooler now and a trash can. Improvement. Another black bar with a word map. Some lights. The place is lit up. And going out, you will see this window with the last stage. There's like a river running down there, right? It's time to look a bit further. Pipes, window, more of the same. Crates in a barrel. There's this sloped roof. Okay, so this is the river and it's basically sewage. Ah, disgusting. Okay. Yeah, there's like this river here. And what else? There's food. So these are like a bunch of propane containers, something like that. Not very specific barrels there. More of the same here. Exit. Yeah, so this is just another way to exit the spawn. There's a bunch of rocks here, which is unique. There was none of these rocks on the other sides of the map, and there's even this little mining cart sign. So yeah, it looks pretty intuitive, right? Like if you all know stages prior, the payload probably starts here. If you want two, starts here. If you just want one, the other one starts here. Looks intuitive. Fences, grids. There's like some sort of building behind those. Cool, whatever. Warning man working. And here there's like this very big slope and wooden structure built, and this is like a upward race, right, for both teams pushing the payload. And here are the two control points. It's about who can get here first. Like payload race, what was it? Nightfall, there is no shenanigan of throwing it down a cliff or something. Although there are like this hook up here, so you know, maybe that matters somehow. A window here, and interesting spot also. Maybe you could use it to the cloak as a spy or build the sentry as an engineer. In any case, down here, anything interesting? So, okay, the ground here is a bit fractured, that's cool. And if you go down here, shutter door, bunch of stuff, barrels, an arrow sign. There is this blocky thing. What else? There's this room with another set of desks and screens and buttons, some workstation of sorts, with a bulletin board back there, and another set of controls and panels and buttons and indicators and stuff. You can go down here, and this This is another exit you can take from the spawn, it seems. What happens if you go here? Keep this doorway clear. So if you go here, you can take the set of stairs, very tight path here. You go in this tunnel, up a bucket there, and you end up here. There's no pickup here because I'm just here through because this is a situation where no clip was used, so you know there's gonna be some problems with that. For example, on Nightfall, it doesn't rain on the other stages if you use no clip to check them out. But if you play on those maps, then it's fine. Then the rains normally, so you know. So watch out if you want to check these maps with no clip and stuff. Very interesting to realize that the map is not symmetrical. You know, there is like this route to the right. It's not, you know, the end of the world, but it's like there's this slight difference. You know, here it's symmetrical again and stuff. What else? For the rest, it's pretty symmetrical. Again, the windows, as already mentioned, with pipes. And I think that's it. And like it seems, this is it for the description. So it's time to get back to the first stage, so we can begin the analysis. So it will be analysis time. Where is it? Yay, health. So it's let's okay, finally. 0. So analysis. For this critique, 8 elements of art will be taken into consideration: points, lines, shapes, forms, space, texture, color, and value. So for points, it's time to look for points. For example, stuff here on the wall. These are like, you can kind of say there are some points here. Those are like black in general, you know, or kind of this color of the wall. This kind of stuff is something you will also hear on later on the texture element of art for this critique. But for now, that's it. Some points on the wall. What else? What else? For points we could talk about. There are some like white ones on the ground. Again, you're gonna hear about these on the textures. And then other use of points. Some white ones on the blackboard. Again, white ones on the wall. On the payload, there is like some black ones, which seems to be like pattern and referring to some, I don't know, nails or whatever was used to build the payload. You know, this could be anything. But yeah, there's some black points here. Is there any other example of points here for us to look into for this art? Already mentioned like points on the walls. Again, there's like black points on the walls here, and again, they are very tight, very closely. They're very close to textures, let's say. What else? So there's a lot of points like this. On my analysis on text, on the analysis on texture, I think it's gonna be easier to look at that. What else? Again, there's some small black ones here. Yeah, okay. So if you go through the other stages, on stage 2, What can you find? More of the same again. Black or white points on the ground. They look like, you know, sputtered paint. That's going to be roughly what's going to be said on the analysis for texture also. And other than that, again, like black points referring to either like damaged textures or white ones referring to paint. What else? For this one, you can consider this as a shape. You know, technically it's part of the question mark, but visually speaking. More of the same. There is a lot of repeating in like visual aspects here. More points on the ground. Okay. And over here, more like this is probably these like gaps. Okay, no what? There you go. These like gaps. Let's say this. You can either look at them as scraped off paint, or I think space here looks like a better deal to analyze this. The element of space instead of you looking at it as points. So anyway, and finally, if you go to the last stage of payload race, pipeline. Okay, if you're here, you can find again the black points on the wall. In here, there seems to be little white points on the ground, or any on the ground in general. More white on the blackboard, you know, chalk. There's that. What else? I'm gonna talk. There's gonna be a lot to talk about in textures later for this. There is like some minute black points here, kind of, maybe. Yeah, somewhat, but again, this will be perhaps more richly analyzed when textures comes into play as some sort of rough or sandy texture. What else for points? For points it seems to be that, mostly it. There's the fractures on the ground, but are there any points? Yeah, kinda some again. Kind of. Which again seems to be very closely tied to the element of texture. More of these here. Again, like damaged parts or wet parts with paint. Yeah, and it seems that's it for points. So just to recap, a lot of white ones on the ground and sometimes on the walls. Were there any on the walls? If memory serves, there was. Yeah, okay. So, just to recap on points, a number of white ones for paint on the ground or the walls, and black ones like that for like damaged parts of the ground and walls. That's it, and other than that, basically a number of black points on the payloads to convey like some part of the way it was built. And finally also white ones on the blackboards, you know, for chalk. that's it for the analysis on points. So let's talk about, it's time to analyze lines now. For lines, like, if you look at this, you gotta be careful because even though there is like a blue part and a grayish, whitish part above, there is no lines here. What's the thickness of the line here, if there is one? So you gotta be careful with that kind of stuff, and that can happen even on 3D, like here on the, here on the locker. Again, you can notice that it's very easy to discern when one part of the locker begins and the other ends, but is there a line, There seems not to be. What else? So for lines, there is a number of lines here close to the nature of the wood, that was used to build this here. So concerning the patterns of the wood, again we're gonna talk. Again, this is stuff for texture on the analysis. But there aren't. This would be like for lines. These are a number of blackish lines with a great degree of curvature, and sometimes some irregular discontinuity, but a roughly regular thickness to them. What else? This looks a bunch of shapes. We're gonna talk about that later. Here this is not tied to texture this time, but somewhat to maybe a little bit, but I think you can say something like forms also can fit. What else? This again there's a bunch of lines on the wall, kind of, which seems to tie very well with some sort of cement-like texture or irregular kind of damaged texture. In this case, a bunch of straight lines with there's a lot of straightness and some degree of 90-degree angles there for edges. But other than that, what else? This here looks a bit better described as texture or form. What else? Again, something closer to texture or form. Right. So there's like the red lines of the payload and the blue ones of the payloads. Those have some somewhat regular thickness to them. The red one seems to be a little bit thicker. Maybe not. So, unless from a distance. That's weird to say. In any case, one set of those are blue, the other is red. It's pretty somewhat regular on the thickness, but pretty irregular on curvature, straightness, and edges. It's all over the place there. Basically following the payload's shape, Other than that... What else? Here used to make the logo, there is white line with a bunch of curvature to it, making somewhat of an oval shape. Regular thickness, and stuff like that. What else for lines? Again, textures there. Here, this is kind of a set of black lines. This is so thick that you could possibly consider this as shapes. But I don't know. But if you consider this as lines, they are a bunch of black ones, straight ones, with a lot of discontinuity, regular in thickness, and basically it. Is there anything else to say for lines? Again, these ones are somewhat similar than what we've seen before, but this time there's not so much of a fracture cement texture, but they're a bit straighter, cleaner, you know. And again, regular in thickness, a lot of straightness, edges in 90-degree angles, and what else? Mostly, you know, a lot of straightness. Is there any other lines here to analyze? There is this thing here that seems to fall better with the element of value, lights and shadows. So it ought to be a good idea to leave it to that element to analyze it. Would you look at that? There are like a bunch of black points here on this wall, on this door specifically also. Similarly to the payload, like it's right, it's like basically concerning, I don't know if nails, whatever it was used to make this door. But yeah. But if you look for lines instead, there are more straight lines here. There's a number of like straight lines on the walls here. Again, 90-degree angles and all that stuff, and possibly fit better with the element of forms, but in any case. This ought to be it for lines. And there is a bunch of like curvy lines with some variety to their thickness. And a lot of curvature, some amount of straightness on some parts. And what else? And like sparse edges, and sometimes a lot of continuity. So you know, this, and again, this is going to fit better when talking about the textures, some sort of cracked texture. And stuff like that. There are probably more lines to analyze, but they ought to, again, fall closer to the element of textures. So I don't know. So you can just look on the next map to see if there's anything interesting there. The next stage. So yeah, B. If you look at stage 2 of payload race pipeline, you can find more of the same on this power room. Nothing new. You could also say there are white lines for the letters on the blackboard. Somewhat regular in thickness, of them white, and there is a lot of curvature on these ones, and some sparse amount of straightness and edges, and a lot of discontinuity. Okay, so what else? What else is there? These kind of lines were already mentioned on the previous stage, so a lot of stuff is gonna just repeat itself here. Again, this cement-like textures and lines. Here, let's see, is there anything interesting on the panels and stuff? There's like kind of this part, which just seems to be tied well either with the element of texture or forms again. These lines are a bit thick. Again, you can either look at them as shapes or lines. If you look at them as lines, you can probably say something like a lot of thickness to them, and a lot of straightness and curvature and discontinuity lasso edges and stuff like that. And you're gonna find that in a number of announcements. Although these ones are black, but follow much of what was just said. Oh, sorry, these ones are white. The other ones were black. These ones, if you consider these as lines and not shapes, very thick white ones on the ground with a lot of straightness to them, less so curvature, and there's also a certain very respectable amount of discontinuity, less so edges and curves, a little bit of those, but still. Is there anything else? A lot of details have just been analyzed here, right? Oh look, this one is another warning with a bunch of, again, black lines with a bunch of straightness and curvature and discontinuity and some edges. Some amount of edges. Actually, there is a respectable amount of edges. Okay, so it's like there's a bunch of everything. There's a lot of curvature, there's a bunch of straightness, there's a bunch of edges. It seems there is no lack of no shortage of either type. There's more of the same here. Again, the fracture texture things for lines there. There's like some lines here which ought to fit better with the element of space as like gaps in between the planks. But if you don't do that, or if you do both, you can say that these are like a bunch of straight lines in varied thickness, some degree of 90-degree angles for edges, and some curvature, but and some discontinuity, but no curvature. All black. What else? I already mentioned something like this for here, but similar these letters, if you look at them as lines and not shapes, you can say again like degree of curvature, straightness, edges, discontinuity, all that stuff. What else? And if you go to the last stage, again with the red, also a lot of curvature on the lines for the red logo. If you go to the last stage, there is more of the same again. But other than that, you can see white lines here again. You can say there's like some white ones in curvature here, maybe making a circle, somewhat thin ones, regular thickness, and what else? That's mostly it, curvy, and continuous. Here there's more of the same, more of the same. Bunch of stuff that fits very well with textures, so that element's gonna have a lot to talk about maybe. There is like none on the rocks. These ones were already analyzed before. And it seems that's mostly it. Because there's a lot of stuff that just already analyzed. There's the cracks here again, there is the patterns of the wood surface, and the gaps of the planks again. And that's mostly it. That's mostly it for lines. It's time to talk about shapes. For shapes. So if you go to stage 1, what time is it? Okay. if you go to stage 1 of payload race pipeline, what you're gonna find is, so for example, the locker here gives up, by the way, shapes are always 2-dimensional, forms are always 3-dimensional, so something for you to keep in mind here. And so for the shapes of this locker, when it's something 3D, different angles give different shapes, so we have both like a rectangular shape, you know, through this angle, and you can also see a hexagonal one through this angle, because like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, not a regular hexagon, but still. So, and that's like the thing you're gonna see a lot on this kind of block models. So other than that, a bunch of quadrangular hexagonal shapes on many parts here. The cylinders have, depending on the angle, a rectangular-ish, and sometimes, let's see, this one's a bit harder to see considering the author's presentation. But it's very easy for cylinders to have an oblong shape, yeah, like this one. So an oblong is like a rectangle with smoothed out edges, so if you look at the cylinder, it's kind of like that, you know, an oblong shape or a rectangular one depending on the angle. Again, quadrangular and hexagonal ones for crates and stuff. The set of planks and the rack has these very long and thin shapes to them. What else? The arrow has the shapes of an arrow. Thin shapes for this object here. The payload has a unique shape to it, unique shapes to it. It's like there's the curvy part on top, and then it gets a little bit squarish at the bottom. And the back of it has all these unique details to it, with the bunch of shapes of the ammunitions, and there's like this oxygen container, the small chimney thing. So yeah, what else? More of the same, more of the same. The rails have this bunch of rectangular shapes with the wood on the bottom, and also this very long shape for the metal part of the rails, you know, very thin and very long shape to it. What else? And the analysis of shapes here. There's like this pizza shape, let's say, triangular shape there thing. For the buildings themselves, there is gonna be again a number of them have the quadrangular and hexagonal ones shapes again, and some with these like tilted roofs give off what we call trapezoidal shapes. Whenever the roof is tilted, there's a number of that. So what else? It seems that's mostly it for shapes. Again, the quadrangular, hexagonal, oblong, and rectangular shapes. The pickups have the unique shapes. This box have, you know, again, hexagonal ones mostly, because, you know, there's some details that change that. And the small health pack has a kind of a, you know, bottle shape to it, much like you can expect. Sometimes just saying, the bottle has a bottle shape is enough. But you know, I think it's a case-by-case basis. It's case-by-case thing. More of the same, more of the same, more of the same. The windows have, again, like rectangular shapes to them. Not hexagonal, but I'm not sure if I should say this is a rectangular shape, quadrangular shape, because this ought to fit better with the element of space. In any case, we have even some details like these tires. Somewhat rectangular, but depending on the angle, it gets way different in shape. It gets the circular in shape, ring-like shape. You know. What else? It ought to be it for stage 1. And the fluid containers have these very unique shapes to them. It's especially the bottom part's very unique, you know. It's not the best idea to just call them a rectangle or something. And some amount of circular shapes on the light bulbs, and so on and so forth. Is activated. If you go to stage 2, 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 we're gonna find a lot of the same again. We have again trapezoidal shapes for the buildings and a bunch of quadrangular, oblong shapes for the cylinders, and oblong and rectangular for the cylinders, quadrangular and hexagonal for boxes. What else? The pipes have some unique shapes if they're very long shapes to them. Alright, you have choose no clip here. Fire extinguisher, something with a lot of detailed unique shapes there. Somewhat circular here. Again, tires. I suppose there's the camera, but again, a bunch of rectangular-ish and hexagonal-ish shapes there. There's a lot of that stuff on Team Fortress 2 maps. So it ought to be it for stage 2. Circle on the B. And is there anything different on stage 3? It's time to find out. No clip, 0. Is there anything different on stage 3? So far, little. Again, all that stuff is here. Some uniqueness on the water cooler. It's like it has some traits of a rectangle, you know. It has one dimension way bigger than the others, but it's pretty unique in shapes, especially on this part. Some shape with a lot of curvature for the trash can, but those are details. For the map itself, is there anything new here? Already mentioned stuff for crates and barrels, let's not repeat it. Let's not go there again. Again, okay, this barrel has some different uniqueness to it, but still. The rocks, so we have there is like the set of rocks here, which are unique in its shapes, you know. Most you can say that they're somewhat concentrated shapes. There's nothing protruding or spreading out from them. Other than that, a bunch of thin and grid-like shapes for any parts of this wooden structure. Many like thin stuff and elongated in shapes. What else? You can say that the blue sign has like the shapes of a wrench. Well, and the rest is mostly the same, right? A lot of stuff that was already analyzed. So yeah, and the Red Company logo also has a lot of circularity for the bomb, roundness in shapes for the bomb. You can say that this part of the sewers, you know, has like a round opening, whatever. Although this part here ought to be better analyzed for the elements of space, but in any case, this ought to be it for shapes. So it's time to analyze the element of forms. So for forms, which is all about three-dimensionality, what's there to talk about? So the open locker has this kind of hollow forms to it with a lot of flatness. The other locker is basically a block, and a lot of minute forms, but I'm not gonna try to focus on. But you know, you want to. It's good to just not focus too much on details, right? Cylindrical forms for the barrels, again some sort of hollow farms with support beams for the rack and something of a lot of flatness and very long in farms for the planks. You can notice the change in terminology here on the choice of words. The payload has this like sphere-like farms to it, some degree on some part, but there is also like a lot of flatness on other part, and something very unique in farms for the back part again, much like for texture, for shapes. Again, blocks and cylinders for the crates. So this symbol here on the control points and the buildings with the tilted roofs, where's an example here? So yeah, and the buildings with the tilted roofs, they have what you can say it's a prismatic farm. So trapezoidal shapes and prismatic farms for the buildings, and also this thing here. So what else? For farms, a lot of flatness on the walls, right? The walls are flat, the ground is flat. Although here it's again, there is like this elevation and there is a bunch of stairs with this layered, leveled farms to them, you know, much like stairs do. What else? A bunch of flatness, and layered farms for the stairs. Flatness. Look at all this flatness. Here's something a bit different because it's being a bit hollow, and there's this chain link fence. If it's very thin, you know, grid-like shapes and forms. Shape and form. What else is there? The tires have like again this ring-like forms to it. It ought to be it for stage 1. And the fluid containers have some sort of a peel-like form to them, you know, long but with smoothed out edges. Oblong is for 2D stuff, an oblong shape. Although maybe you can say an oblong form and it wouldn't be too wrong or anything. So what else is there for farms? Again, some blocky things. Blocky farm for this fuse box. Blocky like, you know, not a perfect block, but still, there are some details. And you can also look at the chimney, as I say, again, some cylindrical forms to them. Okay, if you go to the stage 2 of the map, also before you go there, again, the fluid containers here, it was already said, right, something, although these ones are not that much peel-like, right, they're kind of unique, especially on the bottom part and stuff. You can say that they kind of have some cylindrical parts to their forms, but they're not perfect cylinders by far, and I don't think it's, and to call them peels should not be the best idea also in their farms. So yeah, anyway. Oh, also the moon is on the sky and it's white, and look at those circular shapes, that circular shape there. Okay, that was not said before. So if you go to stage 2, is there anything that much new in terms of farms? Again, a bunch of flatness, stuff like these are, you know, these gaps and spaces are gonna be talked about on the element of space. What else? Again, prismatic farms for a number of buildings. A bit less here, right? This building, this one specifically, even though it does not have a tilted roof, it seems to also have a prismatic farm regardless. And the other ones, a bunch of blocky farms, ones, and some like this one, prismatic. Here there's the tunnel with, there's like this arcs at the top of it, very unique in farms, so some arcs there. What else? And also more of the same. Again, cylindrical for the barrels. The milk can has it very unique forms, very recognizable with a lot of curvature. What else? Again, cylindrical for barrels. Bunch of cylinders, barrels. Flatness for the signs, I guess. And a bunch of stuff on the walls. Okay, and you find a crate here just to end this. Again, a bunch of. There's like a number of protuberances here for these control panels, right? So, okay, that's interesting for farms. And here. And again, blocky for farms for the crates. And finally, if you go to the last stage, you may find. So again, more of the same blocks, and this barrel specifically has a barrel-like form to it, less sofa cylinder. These ones are pretty unique. Not that fair to call this a cylinder, right? It's cylindrical-ish, but the top part's completely different, you know, a bit hollow. The rocks, before the analysis mentioned when talking about shapes, some sort of concentrated shapes without protuberances or anything spreading out, and for the form something similar. There is some degree of flatness to them, but also, yeah, and lack of smoothness, let's say. So there's somewhat small curvatures, but far from smooth, and also the edges are barely any edges there. They're like pretty minute, the ones that there are. And still, and again, like no protuberances, the forms are pretty self-contained and nothing spreading out. And other than that, for this part here, a bunch of very thin cylinders, and something flat and long for this wooden part here, and stuff like that. The river, there's the river, but for the farms of the river, it's like a river. I don't know, kind of long in farms. Other than that, they're pretty much all the same. You could say that these hooks have this like pointy forms to it, you know. There's the noticeable curvature with the pointy end, so those are unique elements. And the rest is again a bunch of prisms, blocks, cylinders that should be somewhere. From some other barrels, stuff like that. And a lot of flatness again. A lot of flatness, although there are these slopes here, but still a lot of flatness on the walls, on the ground often. Even like this ground here, which, you know, can kinda, it has a little, it's not a perfectly flat still, it's mostly flat, honestly. So yeah, and here, there you go, the barrels, cylindrical ones there. And yeah, more of the same. So that's it for farms. So now it's time to talk about the element of space. So for the element of space, there is stuff like a lot of tightness for details, like every single gap in the open locker, and the stuff, the spaces between the stuff is all like tight, you know. Oh, there is a pyro mask here. Cool. In the control, in the spawn room, comparatively, it's a bit more abundant in space, and that's in general what happens for rooms. Some a bit there is more space than others, but still. Then on the middle of the map, it's a bit open. There's this open area for space. There is still like some parts. There are still like tunnels and stuff, which is, as I said, visually abundant in the use of space, especially comparing to the tightness of details, like space between this barrel and this crate, stuff like that, between that milk can and the wall, between this wire coil and the metal plate and the wall, stuff like that. Oh, you know, here's more abundances of space. So far, here open, and if you look at the sky, it's just like expansive. We are in the open, basically, the open night sky. You are there if you play on this map. And here, tight spaces again for the details, and so on and so forth. If you go on the next stage, again something similar. There's like this open part, especially near the payload's rails, although here you do see a tunnel with again what I call the somewhat abundant use of space, much like inside the rooms. Again, this is kind of a broad stroke analysis because there are many differences in the sizes of different rooms, right? But you don't need to be very specific. You don't need to measure every single room to make an art critique. So yeah, stuff like that. There's stuff like this gap, again somewhat of an abundant use of space, visually speaking. And again, there's like tightness for details. And it was mentioned before, there's like gaps between the planks with, again, a tight space for them. There's like, here's not that tight, but still it's somewhat, many parts are tight, and like behind the fence there is a moderate use of space, let's say. It's because even though it's somewhat similar to the rooms, there's a lot of stuff there, so it's, you know, occupying the space. So it's kind of a moderate use there. And so on and so forth, and things in general repeat themselves following that logic of abundant for spaces, more open. In stage 2, more open for the payload, but there is the exception of the tunnel on stage 2 and all that. I just want to find, oops, where is it? Yeah, here you have like this room with a bit of perhaps one of the largest rooms there are for the element of space, if you want to consider it different one, instead of just calling this abundant like the others, you know. Maybe this would be a good fit for it. More abundant than the others. And it ought to be it for stage 2, and if you go to stage 3, what you will find is more of the same. Again, because a lot of stuff repeats itself, right? Because there is another open locker here, so all that was said before also goes here. But even stuff like the dumbbells, again, you know, tight use of space between them, stuff like that. The tight use of space between the water cooler and the wall, and so on and so forth. But the rooms are in general abundant. Some are more than others. And here, like, we have this very long corridor thing. So the geometry can change a lot if you get into the specifics, if you don't try to broad stroke things. What else? Oh, cool. You can climb this ramp to get on top of the roof, apparently. So yeah, and here again it's pretty open in the middle of the map. And the sky is very expansive, you know. It's an open sky. This is not a CP junction, basically. Yeah, it seems like that's mostly it. Again, a gap here with somewhat abundant space, but not as open as the other parts. And here's somewhat of a moderate use of space behind this chain link fence. Because how far does it go? Yeah, either it's something abundant or moderate, I think you can describe as that. Yeah, that's it for the element of space. So, and here, unlike for stage 2, the whole extent of the payloads are on an open space. So, okay. Well, that said, what about the element of texture? Finally, it has arrived. So, okay, first things first, yeah, like, there are some splattery textures on the ground as if paint fell off or something there, it was splattered. There's also the... Thank you, Locker, but that's not necessary. So, there's all the textures here of the patterns of the insides of the wood inside here. It was mentioned for lines and not for textures. It ought to be a good deal also. But similarly for this bench, you know, even though it's a little different. What else? On the walls, again, on the walls, this was already mentioned, but there's like a number of imperfections on it, some kind of texture referring to that, some slight damage textures, slight sometimes wrinkle texture maybe, stuff like that. What else with holes and imperfections? It was mentioned before and it shall be mentioned again. There is like this concrete like fracture like texture between the blocks here. What else? Here on the barrels we have like this kind of faded scraped paint texture, pretty common for 1442 maps. Somewhat of a rusty like texture on this part of the pipe. What else? And something on and a little bit of it on the milk can. Although on the milk can it doesn't look that much rusty and more simply wavy, let's say, the way it was designed. Here it was mentioned before and it shall be mentioned again. There is the whole cracked fracture texture on the ground on many parts of it. On the payload they have again like scraped off faded paint texture and the texture for the patterns of the wood. And that seems to be mostly it for textures on the payload. Somewhat of a translucent one a bit on the light. We have somewhat of a holographic texture for the hologram, wouldn't you know? What else is there? We have this like pattern texture for metal and also a little bit of somewhat rusty texture to it. More of the wooden patterns and rusty texture. Rusty here on this barrel actually, is that it? Maybe just a bit of a wavy one, a bit of a bent texture maybe. And here again this is like scraped off faded paint but on a stronger level, let's say. What else is there? And also again pattern metal. What else? We have all these wavy textures for the metal plates. You know the way it's... We have both like a wavy texture and a... How should I say? Again faded paint work on texture here. And this should be mostly it for the map. A lot was already said. Here there is a bit of a metallic texture, a bit. And also, look, there's a bunch of black points here. This was missing before. But again, somewhat of a pattern one and referring to either nails or something that was used to build this thing. Not that different from the other black points, like this. And also for textures, it has this sort of pattern texture also. What else is there? Somewhat of a metallic texture here on this part. And this should be it in general. The rest, this set of textures are gonna repeat themselves for the most part. On many parts of it. This one again is somewhat of a damaged, imperfect concrete. On some parts like faded paint. And yeah, mostly that. Again, paint splatters on the ground and imperfections. So, there's the hook here. but not much use of textures on it. Maybe like a little bit, but still. So, okay, if that's it. Oh no, I took damage, but I'm fine. If that's it, and you go to stage 2, what you may find. What is it that you may find? Okay. What is it? So there will be a lot of the same again, like pattern textures on the metal, splattered paint, concrete or fracture-like texture. So a lot of repetition in that. Again, the imagining perfect concrete on the walls. We have this sort of a not translucent perfectly, but this kind of glass-like textures on the windows, on the screens. Here, more of the same, more faded paint, more fractured textures, more splattered paint. What else? Anything new? On the tires we have a bit of a dirty-like texture to them, like they are either dirty or damaged rubber, one of those, something like that. This is what you can see. On the shutter, maybe it's better described as a level deform, maybe. What else is there? More of the same, more of the same, more of the same, more of the same in terms of textures, more of the same. Again, wooden planks with patterns on the... Oh, this is different. So we have like the red bricks for textures on walls. Okay, we have already mentioned the metal plate. But these red bricks have this, again, like a pattern texture to them, with some slightly protuberances. They're slightly protruding. This is a good one. So yeah, we have like this slightly protruding texture with somewhat of a pattern to it. What else? Fire extinguisher, not much textures there, just a lot of effect of light and darkness, especially light. Yeah, that should be it. Again, holographic textures for the hologram. And if you go to the last stage, should be over here. If you go to the last stage, let's just look for the differences, right? You can do that. So again, fracture, wavy, stuff like that. The rocks here has some kind of rough or dirty texture to them. The water has a translucent and wavy texture to it. And the ground here has again this kind of sandy, rough, dirty texture. Work on texture, again faded paint, so that's mostly it for textures. Now there's only left the elements of color and value. So let's get through it. Also, it wasn't mentioned yet, but there's some rusty textures on parts of the roof. Although maybe this is more like a faded paint, but okay. Okay then. But here is kind of a rusty texture. Okay. So, but anyway, when it comes to color, so you can say that there is a lot of shades of blue here for blue things, but also we have like the shade of gray, and a lot other shades of gray for the blocky walls here and the ground, so a lot of different blues and grays. There are stuff for details like yellow here, for the barrel or the radioactive symbol. There's red here, and there's also brown on the wooden parts, and there's a lot of wood on the map, so there's also a lot of shades of brown on the wooden parts here, on the rails, on these wooden parts. Here's some sort of dark gray for this part. On the ratting side, there is also shades of red for this set of red bricks. And what else? Shades of white here. Again, shades of brown, gray, brown, red, blue, sometimes white. That's mostly it. A lot of stuff is gonna be usually one of those, and some details in yellow sometimes. Maybe there's like a hose in here somewhere. That's a green classic. That's a green one. It's a classic prop for Team Fortress 2. If you find it, also yellow for the hologram. And the payload again, shades of blue, gray, and brown, and the other one is red, gray, and brown. If you go to the next stage, what you may find is again more of the same, more shades of gray, brown, and blue. This is like a lighter blue, and red. Here again, gray, shades of gray, white, all of that. Here, reddish stuff, shades of red and brown for the walls. Some are red, some are brown, and some details in yellow again. That's it in general. And for the last stage, the control point again are the same, more blue, gray, white, whatever. That repeats, many details in brown and gray. The rocks have this very unique shade of beige, and the water is blue. And that was not said yet, but the sky is very dark, has a shade of black to it. And also on this part here, it's similar to the rocks, right? It's another shade of beige. And the rest is the same, a lot of gray, brown, red and blue, and sometimes white and yellow on some details, like the hologram or this hook thing. So that's it for color. And finally, if you go for the analysis on the element of value, which is about light and darkness, so there's like many points of light and illumination and shades, but they're kinda all over the place. It's hard to see some sort of deliberate use to them other than just realism. What you can say, it's something that's often on the art critiques of the channel, is that the shadows are mild. Yeah, that seems to be the case here also. Like, you can still make out somewhat well the details of the textures on the wall, even on the shades. That intensity of shade is basically the case throughout the whole map. Maybe we're gonna find something a bit darker somewhere, but yeah. And for lights, the illumination, it's again all over the place. The only pattern, let's say, is realism. So there's a lot of brightness, but nothing too flashy usually. The only flash points, again, it's on the directly on the direct sources of light, the light bulbs. So that's the only part where you can see something flashy. Let's respect the author's presentation. Something flashy. Sometimes, in this case, it's not even flashy, just bright there. But yeah. And although the moon is bright, right? The moon, yeah, it's very bright. Not sure if flash is the best way to describe it, but yeah, the moon is bright. And the stars are also bright. And going through the second stage, so this is first stage. Where is the second stage? Over here? Yeah, second stage. Going to the second stage, that's pretty much the same. It's only like about realism, nothing too dark and nothing too bright or flashy, except directly the light bulbs. If you go, where is it? If you go here, was it here? No. Maybe it was here. Where is it? Okay, here's the tunnel. Finally here. If you go even on this room, there is that pattern stands nothing too bright, nothing too dark, because unique rooms are an example of places where you could find exceptions to that kind of rule. On Payload Nightfall, on the second stage in the tunnel, there is a part with a pitch black spot there, very dark on that specific part of the tunnel, but in here, nothing so far. And on the third stage, once again, of that, there is like some sort of illumination tied to this part, but to this like ground part, but even that's not always the case. This part's a bit darker and the others are more illuminated, so you know, again, just following at best realism and the shapes of the shadows that are cast. And yeah, mostly it's, and again, nothing flashy, nothing pitch black. So yeah, even the sewers here, it's kind of far from our view, so if I do no clip 0, now we are underwater. So that's probably the best we can get to in terms of something of a darker spot for value. Yeah, sure, and yeah, only at the insides of the sewers there's like this pitch black spot where you can see what's beyond it. So that's it for the analysis. Now it's time for the interpretation. So it's time to interpret the creative vision. That said, so first things first, it ought to be a good idea to just say a payload race map 1442. You know, that kind of stuff is common, and it's gonna be that kind of thought. It's gonna happen again for this critique, much like for the previous ones. Other than that, what else? Other than that, considering the description, the analysis, and a lot of stuff here, there seems to be so many cues to an industrial setting, like this, chimneys, and the whole bunch of buildings in metal, concrete, and wood. There's the fluid containers, there is a lot of warnings and signs of a workplace environment, and factories are a kind of workplace environment. So considering all of that, also the very name pipeline, you know, pipes are used, for example, to transport fluids, for example, in a factory or industry, if you're using something with those fluids. So all of that may, I think, ought to lead you to an interpretation of something tied to industry. The most dissonant part of that idea would be this third stage, where we have something like we have like rocks in here, and this dirt part of it's just ground, you know. There's no pavement here or anything. But then again, there is even here what would be the river is basically just came from the sewers, and if there is that kind of system in a factory, you know, then naturally you can expect something like that somewhere, where the water of the bathrooms of the employees go, basically. The only problem maybe is this ground part here, but it seems like it's like a isolated part of it. The rocks maybe could also tie to it, but interestingly, these rocks have this mining cart symbol, so is there a mine somewhere? And they're still surrounded by all these buildings and electricity, and we can see the chimneys in the distance. It feels like some sort of exception, but it ought not to be strong enough to break the idea, let's say. So okay, second part for the visual, so something industrial, some sort of factory, industrial, pipeline, name, whatever. even pipeline, I think even pipeline is a, what's the name of it? It's a process in industries and a concept for a industrial process, something like that. All that said, anything else for the creative vision here? Okay, something industrial. There's a lot of industry stuff. There's the payload race map idea. Those two ideas are already somewhat solid, but maybe it's possible for there to be another one. There's the possibility that with the dark sky, with the fact that it's night, and also with all the industrial stuff around, it's possible of an idea that this map was envisioned as giving off some sort of oppressive feel, you know? But does that make that much sense? Just saying because that night is something that feels oppressive, that's kind of subjective, right? It's night, something industrial, pipeline. Because like, what if this map was on daytime, right? Would it break the vision, let's say? That's the question that's got to be asked for the interpretation. Maybe just the two ideas are good enough for the vision. It's like cool to have at least three, but just simply saying something that encompasses a Team Fortress 2 map and something industrial, maybe it's enough. Unless you get a bit deeper into game design. If you think on stuff like where the payload races cross. So far this initial part looks a bit like payload race Nightfall. What about the other ones? On the second stage, the payloads cross inside this tunnel. That's interesting. And then go here, and finally on the last stage. Where is the last stage? Oh, what's happening over there? Over here. Okay. And finally there is the last stage with the beach and stuff. Okay, maybe this is going to sound a bit obvious, but one interpretation you could add, one idea, is that each stage should have something unique to it. The logic here is that on the first stage, the payloads are, crossing each other on the open. Then on the second stage, they cross each other inside of a tunnel, so something unique there. And on the third stage, they are literally one beside the other, so that's pretty unique. And going up, so that's perhaps a reasonable interpretation. It ought to be a good idea to use it. So to recap, the three ideas for the vision here will be a payload race map for Team Fortress 2, a map with industrial vibes to it, something like a factory or industry, and finally for there to be something different, between the stages, something unique for each one. Okay. Simple interpretation here, it seems to be. So, but yeah, if we're gonna go with that interpretation, it's time to move on to the judgment step. For this critique, for this judgment, 6 principles of art will be considered: movement, unity/variety, emphasis, contrast, balance, and proportion. And okay, so getting into movement. Movement, by the way, which is not about animations, it's about how parts of a work of art can move your eyes around in some path or direction. So, what? Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's why you shouldn't ignore the author's presentation if you can. In this case, maybe it's fine, as long as things don't get too crazy. Because how different it is to be here and to be here, you know? So yeah. But anyway, for movement, there is something classic for the payload game mode specifically that should be said here again, which is the rails. Basically, the rails being so long, in many previous critiques, they were mentioned as critics on this channel. On many previous critics on this channel, they were mentioned as examples of the principle of movement, you know. So, and this seems to be the case here also. Other than that, what else? There's staircases, and through the elements of shapes, form, color, texture, all those stuff, they are like repeating themselves, and it seems like they're helping to convey the movement. There's staircases again with the repetition in their layout. Shapes, forms, color and texture, although different textures and colors than the rails. But what else? Staircases, the rails, these rails a bit also, again with the repetition, that kind of stuff. Other than that, maybe a bit these fluid containers, you know, with their shapes and forms also, and colors, textures not so much. But the way they kind of make some sort of an arrow downward. Interesting. And this should be mostly it. Staircases, the rails, and this fluid containers here. So, does any of that help with the idea of a payload race map 14.4+2? How easily, right? The rails. The rails are all about that, so that's where the payload moves through during that game mode. So makes sense. What about the idea of something industrial and stuff like that? So this, as was said, like these fluid containers, which are stuff that you possibly would see in a factory or industry, have some of the principle of movement, and it's easier to see because of the presentation, because they're in the very middle of the map. The payload has to cross this small gap, and so the presentation makes it very easy to see it. And in this way, it seems like it's helping convey the idea of something industrial. If the player is like easily looking at this thing, which has its very unique, again, shapes and forms, appearance of something industrial, you know, it is helping there, it does. And finally, what about this idea of something different for each stage? Through the principle of movement. Interesting. Also, yeah, it was necessary, it was a good idea to see this on all stages, but in any case, but the staircase is on stage 2 and the rails are the same thing. But are there other examples of movements here on stage 2? Yeah, the repetition on the, you know, you can even do something like this. The repetition on the arcs inside the tunnel. Do they create movement? Maybe a bit. This doesn't seem to be as strong as the other ones, but they do create a little bit, and that's easily tied with the idea of something different for this stage. Other than that, any other examples of movement for second stage. Like here, the staircases were already mentioned. Even stuff like there's even stuff like the pipes, like this pipe kind of moves the ice to follow its extent. But other than that, this bridge a little bit maybe. But yeah, perhaps the most interesting idea here is the principle of movement in the tunnel, which is something unique that only stage 2 has. And is there something similar on stage 3? Let's see. On stage 3... Yeah, the ramps, also there's a bit of the principle of movement there. They're still on the rails, it seems like, because the rails are pretty much the same. Although, are there staircases on stage 3? There are, right? There, for example, here. Yeah, it's a bit harder to see, because it depends on where you are on the map. But they're still there and still give you the principle of movement. Also, arrow signs also are a great example of the principle of movement. Although on stage 3, also the river in its extent could be an example of it. Like to move your eyes through the extent of the river. Being, in this case, through texture and color, you know, and with a little bit of help from contrast with the sand over there. All of that's helping. But also the unique ramps of how the payloads are like parallel to each other going up. All of that seems to be helping convey uniqueness for each stage through the principle of movement. So if that's it for the principle of movement, what about the principle of unity/variety, which is all about like different parts of the artwork apparently working together. That's unity. There are many ways to accomplish that: proximity, continuity, repetition, patterns, rhythms. And variety is the opposite, which is easier to understand if you just think about the name, you know, variety. So for example, here the pickups in this spot, they have like pretty unique shapes and forms in comparison to the rest, and colors. And the way they are positioned, all of that has like a lot of variety in comparison to everything that's around them. You know, if there was a bunch of pickups in the space, there will be a lot of repetition, but in this case, there is variety. And both unity and variety can help convey the vision. So let's see here, examples of unity and variety. So for example, the repetition of shades of blue on this part of the map and on shades of red on this one. Also in this case, repetition of the textures of this bricked part. Also continuity and repetition on this woody texture through this ramp that moves on the payload. Repetition of the shapes and forms of this fluid container things. What else? Variety on the payloads themselves. I did mention, it was mentioned some unique shapes and forms for the payloads. Also there is the lines, you know, which are pretty unique. The blue lines and the red lines around the payloads, which by the way are something that follow on other stages when you play on those maps. What else? Even stuff like the blue and the red have some variety because of the differences between the two logos. So yeah, and let's also look for variety and unity on the other stages. It might sound like everything that's not unity is variety and vice versa, and that's kind of right, but the important part is where they are, and if they are helping, especially if they are helping convey the vision, you know, because okay, there's like both variety, and you can have both at the same time also, because here it's like variety because there's a single pile of tires, but there's unity because there is a repetition in their shapes and colors and forms and textures, you know. So there's both here, but so there's both unity and variety on this pile of tires, but the question is, Does any of that help convey that this is from Team Fortress 2, payload race, or a industry factory, or something unique for all 3 maps? You know, that's the important part, to see how much it ties to the vision. So, and also sometimes it's just like, it's not as simple as just saying whenever everything is either Unity or Variety, because sometimes it's just not noticeable. Depends, you know, on a lot of stuff. So anyway, so a lot of, again, repetition, shades of blue and red on the walls, and a bunch of textures being repeated on many parts of it, and continuity in them, you know, for a lot of wood, a lot of concrete, a lot of metal. Here there's like repetition on these arcs, which easily give off a feeling of unity. By the way, don't be surprised if different principles of art interact with each other, are the same part of the art applies to more than one, you know. For example, the principle of movement, as I was saying, it was being said that the principle of movement was all about the arcs, and now there is also something about it for Unity, you know, so yeah. And what else? The rails are another example of Unity, with the repetition with repetition in the wooden part, in colors, shapes, and textures, and continuity on the metal part, in shapes, forms, color. So yeah. And what else? And finally, for stage 3, what can you see? Variety because of the rocks and these signs, although there's also repetition on the signs, right? Variety on these cylinders, which you can only see on the last part of the map. What else? Continuity on the river, also variety because it's pretty unique, there's only one river on the whole map. What else? Unity and repetition for all these planks and these structures, pretty unique for this map, for this stage of the map also. So all of that, does any of that help convey this is a payload race map for Team Fortress 2? Easily, right? Because the rails, again, strong source of unity, and the payloads have a lot of variety in there, so all of that help convey the visual. What about something industrial? I did mention variety and unity on the fluid containers, but also, as was said on the interpretation, the materials are a lot of stuff that, and their textures being repeated and are like something more rough, you know, they're not usually, at least like you could imagine a factory with a lot of concrete and metal being used for many parts of it. Those are materials less likely for a house, or like the walls of a house. But no, there are exceptions naturally, but still, for housing, those are less used materials, concrete and metal, for example. Wood less so, right? There are wooden houses, but still. And there being repetition, continuity of that stuff easily help convey also the feelings of a factory or something industrial, like that. Those are industrially made materials in the first place, no concrete and iron, metal, especially like this with these textures and shapes and forms. So yeah. And finally, what about the idea of uniqueness in each stage? Again, there being unity here could already mention something about this tight gap on the first stage. It was already mentioned unity on the arcs of the tunnel on the second stage, and on the, where is it? And also unity on the rocks, the river, and the set of structures for the last stage, all of which, like, there's unity and variety to them, and unique for this stage, so easily helping convey that part of the vision. So, okay, so what about the principle of contrast? Contrast is about differences in the art, and how do they communicate, especially easy to see if they're juxtaposed. So for example, there's some amount of contrast between the colors and textures of this fractured gray ground here, and this brown wood with a woody texture, bunch of planks on this part here of this ramp. So that's an example of contrast. There's even stuff like the contrast between the shapes and forms of the rails of the payload and the ground around them. You know, all that are examples of contrast. What else? You can mention again these fluid containers have some amount of contrast with the shapes and forms around them. Because the walls are mostly flat, the ground's mostly flattened, but these things have something cylindrical to them, you know. So all of that are examples of contrast. And also stuff like the use of space here on this open part with the very narrow gaps of the fence here, another example of contrast that helps bring us our eyes to the middle of the map in this case, for example. So those are examples of contrast. And what else? Yeah, let's look for other stuff, other examples on the other stages. So here, we could contrast, speaking of space, we could contrast the more open space here with the tighter, although you can still call this visually generous space here in the tunnel. More open here, more visually generous, but not so open here, let's say. What else for contrast? Also on the forms and shapes of the arcs, which are kind of protruding from the ceiling and the walls, you know, and has like this slight curvature. It's not smooth, but still. Of that has some amount of contrast with the walls and the ceiling. And finally, maybe you already can see where this is going, right? And finally here, some strong contrast is, for example, between the river itself and the more industrial buildings around, so very noticeable contrast. But there is also contrast between the river and the ground, the sand around it. There's contrast between the rocks in their colors and texture, and also shapes and forms, and the ground around them. Here it's flat with the gray and fractured texture, stuff like that. So, and there are many other examples of contrast through these maps, but all that to say that I'm not gonna mention every single point of contrast. Let's just think about. It's okay to think about the vision now. So. And if that's helping convey this is a payload map for Team Fortress 2, payload race map, well again yes, because if there's some contrast with the rails, probably it's like easier to see other sources of contrast. It doesn't seem like this one is a stronger one, but it's there, so you know, this amount of contrast is helping, just being there. That's the important part, because if there is any amount of if there's something that is a principle of art there, that means it was a deliberate choice of the author, because the principles are basically that, how the author chose to choose the elements of art. So in other words, that means that if you find any example of a principle of art, that means the author did something there, and so you can compare that to the vision to see if the author accomplished through what they did, if they accomplished what they envisioned. So yeah, so just being some contrast between the rails. But perhaps a stronger one would be between the forms of the payload and the unique forms and shapes of the payload, and the whole bunch of flat forms around and the trapezoidal shapes. That's a stronger contrast. That's also helping convey the vision of a payload race map. Which, by the way, is seen on all three stages, because the payloads exist on all three, except if you use no clip. So yeah. What about the idea of something industrial? You can say there's contrast between the. It does mention like contrast between here, these fluid containers in their farms and this stuff around, that's ought to be strong enough. But also stuff like contrasts of the concrete and the metal and the wood, because wood is kind of a more traditional material, let's say. People have been using wood for buildings for centuries, I don't know. But concrete and metal, in this structure, it's something that came on way later on the industrial age, of the industrial revolution. So that's also possibly a way for you to see contrast that communicates something industrial here. Finally, what about the idea of something unique for each map? It does mention some contrast between this space here of this mesh grid thing and the tight space that the payloads must pass through. On stage 2, there's the arcs again, which are on the tunnel. There are no arcs outside of the tunnel, it seems, and no tunnel without arcs. And the tunnel has the arcs. The tunnel where the payload has to pass through, so you know. Also, the tunnel is not as tight as the gap from this first stage, and again, the stronger contrast could be between, for example, the open space and the vastness of the sky, even stuff like the moon and the night sky. But yeah. But the important part is figuring out if the author accomplished their vision. And finally here, again, easier. The water is pretty weak, only on the third stage, and there's contrast there. And also, these structured things have contrast in their forms and shapes, and they're intrinsically tied to the ramp that goes up, and which is a unique path for the payload of this map, this stage of the map. So all of that's helping. So that's it for contrast. What about emphasis? Emphasis is the principle, which is all about having some sort of focal point in the art, which keeps your eyes there. So, for example, you can say that the uniqueness in the shapes, as far as the textures and the composition, the way the control point was laid about, gives some emphasis to it. You could say that the lines of the payloads in its color, with a little bit of help from contrast around, help bring emphasis to them. The fact that the map is symmetrical already brings some emphasis to the middle of the map, and this set of geometry is, the fluid containers are also helping their unique disposition in the middle of the map. Other examples of emphasis, for example, and those are like different points of emphasis, even stuff like the truck here, because it's only a truck, although the presentation makes it a bit harder to see the truck, considering the game design and stuff. But yeah, that's it. For example, on the first stage. On the second stage, there is emphasis again on the control point, also with the B behind it, and also considering the geometry, which kinda like funnels itself on the control point. It's got this space keeps getting tighter towards the control point. That helps. What else? In the tunnel, funny enough, it doesn't seem to be that much emphatic on stage 2, because there's like the gap to get inside, similar to other gaps around. It's not that easy for the present, considering that, okay, now it's closed, but even when it's open, it's not that easy to, can I do, yeah, you can do this. So, because the tunnel is curved, you still can't see that much, yeah. Ooh. Okay, perfect. Even like this, it doesn't bring that much emphasis. There is some amount, because both rails go inside, which is a bit tied to the principle of movement, but anyway. But it's kind of a very weak emphasis there on the tunnel. But okay, maybe it's there. Maybe you can say it's there, and it would be a reasonable argument. And also, whoops, I got back to stage 1. And also you can think about... Where is it? Where is it? Do you know what I want you to find here? Was it here? Where is it? Wow, is it? Okay, finally, yeah, here. And here, this part being so open in comparison to other rooms, and also with unique elements like the control panels there, also bringing out, you know, our point of emphasis here. The symmetry, it's in the middle of the symmetry of the maps. Of that, and finally on stage 3, there's emphasis, for example, on the whole structure, on the way the wooden parts here of the structure are pretty unique, you know, they are in the middle of the map, all that stuff. Yeah, the rocks there are a source of emphasis. So, any of that helping with the idea of a payload race map? Yeah, right, because of the emphasis on the control points through their unique textures and shapes, also the position, all of that is intrinsically tied to the rules of the game. Also, it's already time. So what else? What about something unique for each map? Yeah, there is something like that. On the first stage, there is the middle of the map. Also these lines help with bringing emphasis there. So that helps make you look at the unique part of the map, the tight gap in the middle. On the second one, there seems to be less use of emphasis to communicate on the tunnel, which would be the defining feature of the map. And there's also some amount of emphasis here, which is okay, different, but a bit of a weaker use, but perhaps it's fine to consider it's also helping. And finally here, emphasis on the unique structure. Oh, that's helping convey the vision. Something showcases the unique ramp, the unique geometry of this map. Okay, that was it for emphasis. Lastly, there is only balance and proportion. So balance is about visual equilibrium or tension. There is in general like not much of that. Everything is mostly in visual balance, visually in equilibrium. Here on stage 2 as well, it's like everything was well built. Let's say nothing's falling apart, nothing's being tensioned. Most of these are just a bunch of buildings, with the exception of the structure here on the last one, which seems to be a bit, let's say, improvised. Made by hand, and so there seems to be some slight imbalance there. But so slight, so minute that perhaps doesn't even make sense to say there is there. Just because it's handmade doesn't mean it looks unbalanced, right? Because, yeah, okay. They're like four wooden stakes and everything still seems pretty balanced after all. So none of that helps with the vision does, right? Because everything being visually balanced has nothing to do with payload race sorting for the show. Visually speaking, you would have to create a whole story just to tie those things together. What about the idea of something industrial? Often factories will want something, stable, but that's not the only. Just to say something is visually stable in equilibrium doesn't seem to be that reasonable to say it's from a factory just because it's visually stable, black extension. And finally, what about uniqueness? Yeah, again, like nothing to say for the first stage. Oops. A child is playing, having fun. What else? What about stage 2? That was it for stage 1. Stage 2, there is also everything is in general in equilibrium, so there's not much to say. Okay, let me go to stage 2, please. There we go. So yeah, everything is in equilibrium, there's not much to say. The tunnel seems to be, you know, fine. Everything is stable. If the tunnels had like, if the arcs seems to be tensioned or, you know, something like that, possibly it could be an interesting way to convey the uniqueness of the map through the principle of balance, but, you know, no, there's nothing like that. And finally, the last idea would possibly be this part here, but it doesn't seem to be strong enough. It's because there's a lot of wooden parts here. Even though it's kind of seems like it was handmade or something, it still looks relatively stable. So yeah. If it looked a bit unstable visually, then it could help convey the uniqueness of this part of the map, but yeah, because if that makes you pay attention to it. And finally, there's the principle of proportion, which is about these different sizes of things and how do they relate to each other, how do they possibly help convey the vision. So we have, for example, the buildings are very big. You can compare those to the payloads, which are small. The rails are pretty long, have some unique dimensions to them. And other than that, we have a bunch of details that are small in size. Mostly it. If you go to stage 2, that's mostly repeating itself, a bunch of different details in smaller sizes, milk cans and barrels and whatnot. The building is very big. There is the long rails. The payloads ought to have a size. The payloads have a size similar to some details actually. Like this pile of boxes is not too far in size from the payload. And finally on stage 3, there is also where am I going? Okay, so finally on stage 3, there you go. Finally on stage 3, the ramps are also noticeable in size. Much like the buildings, you know. It's a pretty big structure. So yeah, those are examples. And there's the river, also unique in size. Nothing like it. Has some unique dimensions. It's hard to compare it to buildings just in size, I would guess. You can say. So does any of that help convey the creative vision? What about the idea of a payload race map 1442? Easily, the rails again. The rails have its very unique dimensions. Because they are so long, you know, there's nothing like it on the map, so easily that helps you notice the creative vision. What about the idea of, that's the case for all 3 stages. What about the idea of something industrial? So the size of the buildings are pretty unique. There's nothing like it. The whole mega structure of buildings, there are a lot of them. And you could say they tie somewhat to the amount of space a factory or industry could take, possibly. That's maybe a reasonable argument. And finally, that's the case for all 3. And finally, what about the idea of something unique for each map? That's where maybe it's not gonna work that well. Oops, where am I going? Let's see. So the unique part of the first map especially is the middle of it. And there is like the thing with this gap, even though it's very tight for the payload, there is a lot of other gaps in the map with similar sizes, so you know, through the size it's not helping. Not even like the corridor itself, because there are other similar size corridors, you know, somewhat. Maybe not with the perfect exact measure of it, but as far as size goes, it doesn't seem like that's helping convey the uniqueness of this stage. And that kind of already breaks the vision, because you should, the idea here, because the vision was about there being something unique for each stage, and if you can't recognize anything unique for the first one, you know, then the principle of proportion is not helping with that. On the second stage, that's right. I was going to say something. I was going to say like, there's like the open spaces in comparison to the tighter spaces, but that doesn't help convey the uniqueness of the map. Just helps convey that this is payload race. If there's like open spaces where there's the payload and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah. Just out of curiosity, on the second stage, is proportion helping? So I have this tunnel, which has some relatively unique length to it, although the size of it is similar to other gaps like this one. And the question is, there something with a similar length to it? And more or less, this room, for example, is not too far off from it, especially if you consider like from this door to the other. I guess this one might be a matter of personal perspective, or whether or not this size is unique enough, and so to proportion help convey the vision. You can consider this part is to proportion help convey the vision, although again it doesn't matter because for that idea, because the first stage doesn't have unique proportions to convey its uniqueness. And finally, on the last one, the very open space ought to be also help for the proportion, because in this case maybe that logic goes off. It's a bit tighter on the outside, and on the open space, in this case, it's pretty. There's no like sections of the map. It's just there's only this open space, and the rest is tighter spaces, corridors, and that's where the unique part is. Compare that to stage 2, where there are the tunnels. There are this open part, and then there's the tunnel, and then there is another open part, you know? So there's like 3 sections, which obviously is a bit because of the uniqueness of the second stage is the tunnel, and the uniqueness of the third stage is the whole structure and the very big ramp, among other things. But anyway, a bit of a shame for proportion, because that through the sizes here, that doesn't seem to help convey the vision. A bit of a shame, because on the other stages that's going on, but not here, but oh well. Well, in any case, all ideas of the vision, no matter what, were conveyed through many of the principles in many ways, right? Good designers, right? So yeah, the only logical conclusion here is that this is a successful work of art. Congratulations, designers of Payload Race Pipeline. Hooray, if that interpretation is correct. Then the vision, the objectives, or the goals were achieved. That was it for today. Join the stream tomorrow when we're gonna have more gameplay and art critiques. So yeah, bye!